Good evening, coaches, and it's such a great pleasure to be chatting to you again. We've had a lot of interest in this week's Intune with Sport coaching webinar, and we have limited time, so let's get straight into it. So we have great pleasure in introducing our distinguished guest to you today. Just to give a little bit more information on him, Bongani Zondi is the Deputy Director of the Department of Basic Education in the Sport and Enrichment Directorate. Of course, most of you know him already. Just looking at his responsibilities, it is to coordinate and manage sport and enrichment programs in education, including school sport, art, and in the cultural sector, he manages programs such as choral music. He's well educated. He's got a Bachelor of Science degree and a postgraduate certificate in education. But what I really like about him is he's really living his job. He's an active athlete and has been for 28 years, completing 12 Comrades marathons and 10 2 Oceans, and 20 years as an athletics coach. Wow, that's really impressive, Bongani. But today he is focusing on his responsibility as a director responsible for school sport. Bongani is well known to us at Intune Communications because we've worked with him in the past on the Motsepe Schools Cup, which is a soccer tournament. But that's enough of me taking up your precious time. Sean has furiously been communicating with you all and collating all your questions that he's going to put to Bongani. But we just want to point out a couple of things here. First of all, we really have received a massive amount of questions, and many of the questions were pretty similar. So we have coordinated them into one just to save time, and we want to get through as many as possible. We see from most of your responses that you're all really keen to get onto the sports field, and you really need to know what this entails. So, Sean, I'm going to switch off my mic and I'm going to switch off my video, and it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Cassie. Welcome everybody to today's webinar. Thank you very much, Bongani, for agreeing to talk to us today. It's actually great to help us or help schools clarify in certain aspects with regards to school sport and the return to school sport. From my side, it's an absolute honor to host this topic and speak to you about the various aspects within school sport. But I'll get immediately onto your talking, and I'll immediately get into the questions because we do have a lot of questions on the plate today. Mm-hmm. So just to start things off, it must have been a very tough time this year for the DBE. As you were responsible to keep kids and coaches safe and at the same time get learners onto the sports field. How's it been? And give us an insight into this past year.
Oh, thanks a million, Sean and Casey, for providing us an opportunity to engage with the coaches as well as with everyone who's currently on the platform. From our side, we really appreciate that opportunity. Indeed, this has been the past year has been quite a tough year, filled with many uncertainties. When we first heard that in the world there was a potential spread of the coronavirus, and when the president eventually announced the hard lockdown on the 15th of March 2020, indicating that everything was going to come to a stop, even in terms of schooling, in terms of everything. So even on our side, as the education sector, there were a lot of uncertainties as such, because no one was expecting that, and we were quite in the dark, not knowing what was going to happen. More especially with the academic year as such, as well as with our programs. We know there was talk even in terms of extending the academic year and all of that. But eventually we ended up being able to save the academic year, even though it was extended, which was a great relief in the system. So last year, the year of Corona, it has been a very tough one. even to some of the personnel in the system, because eventually we lost some of the officials, some of the political heads, with great wealth of knowledge in the system, in the programs, coaches, some of the technical officials passing on, some of the conductors of our school choir. So that in itself left a void in the program as such, because we're losing a quite experienced personnel, the MEC of Northern Cape, our own Mr. Themba Kojan, who was now the HOD in the Eastern Cape Education Department. So it was a really, really tough year as such.
Thank you. So just for everybody to understand, and these were quite a few questions that came up, a very common question that came up. So can you help explain to everybody, and I'll go through the different questions, but the structure of the department and the reporting structures and the responsibility between government, schools, and federations. So the first question is, what are the roles and responsibilities of the federations and the sporting codes with regards to the delivery of the school sports program?
Okay. No, as we all know that currently we are operating in terms of the Memorandum of Understanding that was firstly signed in 2011 and eventually updated after its expiry date. The new one was signed on the 30th of May 2018. Now that Memorandum of Understanding enjoined the two departments, the Department of Sports and Recreation South Africa, which was then called that. Now it's called the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, as well as the Department of Basic Education in terms of the delivery of the school sport program, according to the 6 levels. The first 3 levels being at a school level, inter-school, as well as second level, being basically the responsibility of the Department of Basic Education in conjunction with the provinces as well as the districts. And from district level, provincial level, up to national level, that one being the responsibility of the Sports and Recreation South Africa, which was then called that. So that has been the guiding document in terms of the implementation of the school sport program. Now, it also details the roles, delineates clearly the roles and responsibilities of the other stakeholders which are pertinent in the system. The national federations, cascading down to provincial district, as well as the school sport code structures. The national federations are the custodians of sport, and they are responsible for providing that technical support, the technical assistance, as well as support to the school sport codes, which are committees which are elected and mostly represented by teachers, which are at the ground in terms of operations. And then what normally happens in terms of arrangements is that the school sport code then has an associate membership to the federation, so that there is always that linkage, even in terms of sharing information, in terms of sharing data, even in terms of ensuring that the programs are effectively implemented as such. And then you also have your school governing bodies, which are very pertinent in the delivery of the programs within schools. They are the governors within the schools. So they determine the calendar of the school, the codes that are to be played by the school, and then in collaboration with the school management teams, which is your principal as well as the teachers who are responsible for those particular codes. So that is how that arrangement is. So currently, even that with regard to that memorandum of understanding, because now the Department of Sports and Recreation has now merged with the Department of Arts and Culture. So there is also talk in terms of reviewing and also infusing some of the arts and culture aspects as such. We are also in the process as DBE of also looking at the policy in terms of the co-curricular and enrichment programs policy, so that that space is better regulated, because sometimes you find that there are conflicts in some pockets between the stakeholders who are supposed to be working collaboratively as such. But whenever that is brought into our attention, we as well as Sports and Enrichment try to ensure that we solve such.
Okay, then some school bodies believe that there's not enough representation of schools in various sporting federations. How does the department make sure that school sports structures are well represented in the federations?
Yeah, in fact, that is an ongoing engagement, because I know even recently we had one-on-ones with one particular code in trying to ensure, because that associate membership at the federation in terms of powers too, because they must have all the powers in terms of voting, in terms of decision making. Similarly, even within these code structures, so you have a federation member being part of that, so that there is that collaboration in terms of operations. But what we are also doing, because at least if you have a policy and you are able to regulate some of these things, you are then able to ensure that there is some sort of stability in the system. So that is one of the moves that we are undertaking as the system, as the sector, to come up with a policy. But it's an all-encompassing policy. Previously, we had a draft school sport policy, but then upon the advice from the ministry, it was indicated that no, let's also include all the enrichment programs. So hence now it's called the co-curricular and enrichment programs policy, which we are in the process. We are finalizing processes in terms of consultation. All the stakeholders have been consulted. So now it's undergoing consultations and engagements at senior management levels with the HODs as well as the MEC, so that at the end of the day, it is published out for comments. I'm sure even in this particular platform, at one point or the other, we can also be able to come in and also just talk about that draft policy as such, and see how we can also be able to receive inputs. Because the key thing in terms of the delivery of the school sport program is to ensure that because learners are not affected in one way or the other, in terms of where you find that probably there are turf wars, or there are conflicts even in terms of the roles and responsibilities as such. So so that there is clarity in the system.
Okay, what role should a school governing body and teachers play in school sport programs? I know you've already explained it, but just to re-clarify it a bit, who should give directives to the school in sport federation? Should it be the federations or the SGB that actually give school directives in sport? And I think this also pertains to if they can and cannot return to sport.
Well, with regard to that, in terms of return to sport, more especially in this era that we're in terms of the corona or the pandemic that we're in, no matter what the body that has been instituted to provide direction to everyone in the system is the National Corona Command Council, which is headed by the president. That now moves down to provinces. So all departments, all federations, all schools, including SGPs, because SGPs have powers at a school level, even moving up, which is enshrined in the South African Schools Act, which clearly states what the SGPs are supposed to be doing in terms of determining the curriculum of the school, in terms of determining the co-curricular activities in the school. But they do it as a body comprising, or at a school level, comprising of teachers, of principals, as well as the code committee members within that particular school. So that it also goes up because even when we talk about now the National Command Council, in terms of consultation, we have the major stakeholders, being your school governing bodies, who are consulted whenever there are initiatives, whenever there are developments within the system, the teacher unions, so that even with regard to the proposals in terms of the programs, those are then also cascaded down to provinces as well as to districts as such. So that line of communication is always provided, but with a directive from the National Command Council and through the Department of Corporate Governance and Affairs, that is COGTA.
Okay. Who's in charge of school sports between the Department of Basic Education and the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, given the fact that school sports programs are to a large extent coordinated at a level of DSAC, which confuse teachers and school code structures?
Yeah, both departments they work collaboratively. But then, as I explained earlier on, in terms of there are 6 levels. It's at a school level, it's at a local level, it's at a circuit level, district level, provincial level, as well as national level. So even though we have these 6 levels, which are then also cascaded into between the 2 departments in terms of lead departments according to those rules. But whatever pertains to the school sport program, both departments play a leading role in terms of providing that direction at national level as well as at provincial level as such. So both departments play a critical role, collaborative role in terms of the delivery of the school sport program.
Okay, so now we can get back into the nitty-gritty of what's actually happened today. We understand the structures. Let's get into returning of school sports. So now we've come out of lockdown and went back into lockdown level 3. How did this impact your plans?
Now, it had a very great impact across the system as such for our enrichment programs. As you know, our enrichment programs are mass-based. Meaning that we strive on mass participation, so they involve quite a large number of learners, teachers gathering. So as a result, there was that potential. They have that potential of spreading the virus. So as a result, when the lockdown started, the schools were closed, and then there was an easing in terms of the alert levels up until we reached alert level 3. Now, because now everything was stopped, there were no mass public events, choral estate forts, choral practices. We didn't have our usual district, provincial, as well as national championships as such. So it had a great effect. And throughout the system, be it provincial, national, there was also a reprioritization of budgets, budgets that were geared, let me make an example, to host the district events, provincial events, national events. In all our enrichment programs, we had to be reprioritized because there was no way that we were going to have those large gatherings of learners and teachers as such. And then as time went on towards October, when on the 21st of October 2020, having looked and also received advice from the health professionals, we were then able to start with the non-contact sport, obviously subject to those health protocols in terms of social distancing, in terms of sanitization, all those processes being in place. We then started to have some sort of activity, controlled activity happening in the system. Well, unfortunately, with regard to contact sport, it was not covered, but only contact sport training in terms of ensuring that our learners are kept busy, because it was lockdown. It was very frustrating to our kids, even at home. So you could see that our learners were constrained in terms of movement, because now they couldn't do what they are used to doing.
Okay, so what are the actual basic rules with regards to returning to sport currently? And I think these change on Monday next week, if I'm not mistaken. So when the government Gazette comes out next week, Monday, how do these rules change?
Yeah, in fact, what is happening now, because in October we were under alert level 3, and then on the 12th of February, then the department released the adjusted alert level 3, which talked to what I was talking about. So that is the one that is currently in operation. With regard to alert level 1, as we know that the president announced that the country was moving to alert level 1, then the Department of Basic Education undertook an extensive consultative process where we were consulting with all our stakeholders, teacher unions, SGBs, principals associations, civil society, and as well as with the provincial education heads of department as such. So now the Gazette that is being consulted is the one that pertains to level 1 as such. So there are conditions because as I indicated earlier on, we take cue from the National Coronavirus Command Council through the COCTA department. Some of the conditions is that, in terms of indoor activities, a maximum of 100 people must be there, or can participate. In terms of outdoor activities, a maximum of 250. Now, sometimes with regard to the indoor activities, because now COCTA has placed it, has kept it at 100. Sometimes you get a venue that has the capacity of about 1,000. I make an example of 1,000 people. So, and then people say, oh no, we can actually bring 500, because it also says 50% of the capacity of the venue. But that 50% it indicates to a venue which has the capacity of carrying less than 100 people. So if a venue is able to carry 80 people, so it means that you are not allowed, according to the regulations, to reach that 100 because it will be an overflow as such. So 50% of that capacity, which means that you must have 40 individuals. And then also the other one of the conditions that are also being consulted on is with regard to the spectators. Currently, there are no spectators allowed in all our events. COCTA is also directed as such. Things like also even conditions or prescripts with regard to the entry and exit into the stadium. So the Gazette will be talking to those that you probably have one entrance point where you can be able to undertake all your health screening processes, even that questionnaire which must have details of the learners, the IDs, the ID numbers, the addresses, so that we assist also even in terms of contact tracing, if ever there are reported cases as such, as well as the issues. Some of the things that are also there is with regard to the issues of social distancing as well as masking. Of course, for those who are participating in sport, they won't be wearing masks, but those who are probably, say, the reserves who are part and parcel of the team are then required to have masks. Your technical officials or that will be operational in that particular stadium or place as such. And then it also talks to things like what must happen with regard to the ablution facilities, how that must be controlled, as well as sanitization of equipment, of playing equipment before the play, as well as after play, as well as the temperature screening in terms of temperature, so that the threshold that is put according to the Department of Health. If your temperature is more than 37.5, you are then isolated and cannot be able to be part and parcel of that. So, but also one thing that is probably a shift from the Gazette that was gazetted on the 12th of February, which spoke to non-contact sport. So in this particular one, we are also there is also consideration for contact sport as such. So it has been consulted with the stakeholders that I've already mentioned, and inputs are due back tomorrow, so that afterwards all these inputs are then presented through to the legal for their consideration, the legal services in the department, and then next week they will be released, and then we'll also certainly also circulate to all the stakeholders once it is released, and then it's only then that it starts to be operationalized.
Now, will special schools fall part of the same category as mainstream schools with regards to returning to sport, or will they have a different approach taken?
No, essentially the regulations they cover all public schools, be it special schools, be it normal schools, but of course, with the special schools, there will be added precautions even with regard to, there is a standard operating procedures that we are using as the department in terms of minimizing the spread or the possibility of the contraction and the spread of the virus as such. So all those will also form part and parcel of the guidelines with regard to the specifics now in terms of, so that, because we don't want a situation where, because schools are communities of teachers, learners, staff, people who are also assisting in the school. So if you have one outbreak, it actually compromises everything, because now it means that the entire school becomes affected in one way or the other. So we are very cautious in terms of that. Even the safety regulations that are in place, the provinces are aware of those safety regulations that are in place, even schools as such. So strict adherence to that is very pertinent.
Did the Department of Basic Education get advice or seek guidance from any other country? So the whole world's pretty much in this kind of same situation, and there are no real rules that led into it. I mean, this is a first-time kind of thing for all of us. So did you guys seek any advice outside of South Africa?
Yeah. In fact, that's a very important one, because this thing affected everyone throughout the world. So the department has also been in consultation with the various stakeholders, that is your professionals, in terms of seeking that advice. But what also happened is recently, from the 25th up to the 27th of February this year, the minister then convened our annual basic education Lekgotla, sector Lekgotla, which was a gathering which had all the MECs from the 9 provinces were there, the HODs, school governing bodies, teacher unions, and And in that, because what was unique about this year's Lekgotla was that, one, it was held virtually, but also in terms of the panelists who were also invited. We invited panel members from a number of countries to basically share their experiences, even researchers around the risk-adjusted differentiated approach to phasing in of schooling, because that phasing in schooling, it includes academics, and it includes all the activities that happen within the school. So we have done that. We've received some inputs from countries like Finland, China, Italy, France, as well as from countries within the African Union, as well as the SADC. There has been those engagements led at the ministerial level as well as that at the Director General's level, in order to be able to get those input and be able to see how we can then also try to infuse some of the advice that we've done that exercise.
Okay. So now, one of the questions that was asked, because there's a clear line in some points, but sometimes it's actually not that clear. So some schools are struggling with the differentiation between contact and non-contact sports. So something like athletics, of course, is non-contact and rugby is contact. But some sports are, they're pretty close to, the line is not that defined. What is your, what do you define as a contact and non-contact sport?
Yeah, in fact, the deadline that you're talking about is we've also experienced such when we were dealing with the consultations. Throughout the country, there are plus minus, that is in total about 190 sporting codes. And all the codes also wanted to be able to provide an opportunity to play. With regard to non-contact and contact, okay, contact sport is where there is physical touching, like your football, like your rugby as such, where they also engage in the scrum and such. With regard to non-contact sport, so we differentiated between codes where, okay, there's no contact, and also codes where there is minimal contact sports like netball, like swimming, like tennis, like cricket. So all those codes, we then classified them as non-contact sport, but even with regard to athletics, which you are saying that it's a non-contact, it also depends probably on the event, like your middle and long distances, your 800 meters, 1,500 meters. They can also be, because they are running in a group as such, and you find that there is also touching, jostling around the corners as such. So that line is there. So that's why even when it comes to the regulation, in terms of the precautions or that must be undertaken, we stress that a lot because so that we don't find ourselves being engaged in an activity. Even now, as we are opening to contact sport, but we are still receiving contributions or inputs from stakeholders. So it's not as normal as we used to be, because there will always be restrictions. There will, in terms of numbers, restrictions in terms of some of the processes and procedures that are undertaken, as such. Because the key thing is to ensure that we save lives. At least now with the vaccine coming in, and also even in all the countries, including South Africa, we can only be able to hold such, or to compromise and participate in such modified engagements until we are able to reach that herd community as such. So that because right now it's still the risk is still too much. So that's why we tread carefully.
Yeah, because I've got a comment here from one of the coaches saying that they're trying to follow the rules as much as possible, but sometimes there's a hazy line, there, and they interpret something the one way, but the government interprets it the other way, and then they're in breach of the regulations. So is there any possibility in the Gazette in actually putting out which is like a contact sport, which is mild contact, which is no contact sport, or should they actually just wait for the different sporting bodies within each one of those sports to feed back to them and tell them what they can and can't do?
I think what is critical in this is this like this platform that we are engaging in. I think it assists on top of, because sometimes you find that within a Gazette you cannot be able to put in everything as such. So engagements such as these, I think they become very key as such. But with regard to the one that is being consulted on, because the two distinctions, your contact sport as well as your non-contact sport, but it will also be providing a detailed conditions and prescriptions in terms of, okay, if we are engaging in contact activity, what are some of the things that we can do? It will also even be talking about things like with regard to competitions, because I know that we are also competitions, how they can be held and such. So once all those inputs and contributions are collated and then finally signed off by the ministry and released or published next week, then we will also then follow up with meetings with provinces to better clarify some of the things that might not be clear in the regulations, and those engagements, the expressions that those engagements also happen at a provincial level, at a district level, so that all our stakeholders are better informed.
Cool. Yeah, because there's people here asking about like if netball is non-contact and hockey should be non-contact and that kind of stuff. So it's quite a difficult line for your, what you can and can't play and what sports fall within, contact and non-contact. Okay, so some sports such as SA Rugby sent out a 2-month plan to return to play. But then in last week's webinar, we had it that Noel Ingalls said that, but it hasn't been 100% approved yet. And now, yesterday, we got a press release saying that over 18 club rugby is allowed, but under 18 schoolboy rugby is not allowed, or school rugby is not allowed. Is this correct? Are they allowed to return to play, or are they not allowed to return to play from a school rugby perspective?
Yeah, I know that the Minister for Sports, Arts and Culture requested the federations to provide with plans, but those plans basically pertain to the resumption of professional, as well as amateur sport. With regard to education, to school sport per se, because now the lead department in terms of that is the Department of Basic Education. So there is also an extensive consultation process with all the stakeholders. Now, hence, the Gazette that we are busy working on, that will be released next week, because there are standard operating procedures within schools which talk to safety protocols, safety issues, which also even detailed in terms of the personnel that can be able to come into schools and all those precautions as such. So due to that extensive consultative process, which involves teacher unions, SGBs, the one which pertains now to school sport is the one that will be released next week after all the inputs are collated.
Okay. A lot of questions coming in, both on the Q&A section and on comment section.
Yeah.
It's actually quite interesting to see all the questions that are coming through and trying to group them together so we can follow a certain line of thought. Okay, so one of the schools actually asked that they'd been instructed to follow the protocols and guidelines of the DBE and not the sporting codes. Is this true? And why must we follow the DBE when the relevant sporting codes already have the guidelines?
Yeah, in fact, on this one, as I indicated earlier on, because we are not in a normal situation as such. So in terms of providing direction through to everyone, through to all the stakeholders, through to all the departments in the country, through the National Coronavirus Command Council, headed by the President, and then the relations are then done by the COCTA department. So all departments, all entities within the country are then required to follow that line in terms of guidance as such. So even with regard to the regulations that are done by the Department of Basic Education, so they are only released after an extensive process has taken place with the SGBs, the teacher unions, all those stakeholders are consulted. And then they also go back to their different constituencies in order to be able to get inputs. So such that we are able even to get input straight from a school going up to the district, provincial, ultimately those inputs come through to us through those structures as such, including the principals associations, which are also a body that is consulted as such. It is at a school level that process needs to be done thoroughly. Because as I indicated earlier on, it's a community of people. You find that in a school you have even those schools are now rotating, but you find that you have a school of 1,000 learners and a certain number of teachers. So that process must be done thoroughly, because once you have a case of one individual, because sometimes you find that some of the people are asymptomatic. So once you find, you have that case, it has the potential of actually disrupting the whole schooling process as such. So that's why the consultative process is done extensively, so that we are able to ensure that even though we won't be able to cover all the loopholes, but we ensure that we cover we try to cover everything, so that whatever happens, at least there are measures to be able to try to prevent such.
So yeah, so I mean that's one of the questions that comes up quite often too, is that so government says that a certain sport can start, but then the body itself comes back and says it can't, or even the body says it can, but then within the provinces say that specific sport cannot take place. So schools, who should who's the final line that they should actually listen to then? Because, sorry, I'm going back to this again, because it is coming up quite a bit now, because now they hear that, so one level can say that it can, the next level says it can't, the next level says it can't. So does it just come back to, each step down? So the government says overall that you can play, for example, you can play sport, but then the federation doesn't feel that they're prepared enough for everybody to go back to sport and then stop it. Or the federation says they're happy that people go back to sport, but the school specifically itself sits back and says, well, actually, as a school, we're not prepared to play yet, so let's hold back yet. How many lines of these can actually stop the schools from playing until the parents at home or coaches and teachers themselves can actually say, let's go back and we can actually start playing sport?
Yeah, because once the Gazette is published and signed off by the Minister of Basic Education pertaining to all the activities that happen within the school, it is the final guiding document. So now it means that because it's released at national level, cascaded down to provinces, cascaded down to district, and then finally reaching the school. So if the published Gazette is saying, I'm just making an example, is saying there must be 100 participants indoor. So that is set because it has also been communicated and also been engaged with the Department of Culture as well as the National Command Council. So now a school cannot then say, okay, no, in our particular school, we would like to increase the number to 150. So that Gazette, it is the Gazette that provides direction through to everyone within the system, including federations, including codes, at a school setting as such. Because I know that these processes they happen concurrently. I know that we at the Department of Sports and Culture, federations were also required to provide their plans, more especially with regard to professional sport as well as amateur sport. But we know with regard to school sport, a cabinet decision was that even the Minister of Culture always indicate, the president when he does his address, specifics pertaining to schools are a responsibility of the Minister of Basic Education as such. So that Gazette, it then provides guidance throughout the system in terms of school learners participating in the program.
Quite a few of the coaches here are saying that their schools don't receive the Gazette or they don't get access to the Gazette. How can coaches get access to the Gazette?
Yeah, normally, okay, it's in fact, it's good that you're also raising that because, when the Gazettes are issued out, they are sent to provinces, the expectation is that they will go to the districts and ultimately reaching the schools. But what the department also does to assist the system, they also upload these Gazettes are always uploaded onto the departmental website. But what we can also, because now at least we've started with this engagement through you, Sean and Casey, whenever the Gazette is released next week, I will also share with you so that you can also, because we always want information to be shared across all the levels. We'll also share with you so that you can also share. We also share it with teacher unions so that they share with their members, SGPs, so that they also share with their members, principals associations, so that they also share with their counterparts from national down to the local level.
Okay, so pretty much as of next month or next week, all school practices, as long as it's gone through each one of the phases, can actually return to play. And now, when it comes to matches, now you've got your intra-school matches, you've got your inter-school matches, you've got your inter-provincial matches, and that kind of stuff. So, what kind of matches and what kind of tournaments can schools play in, and can contact and non-contact schools take part in tournaments?
Yeah, no, in fact, the Gazette also talks to that in terms of the competitions or participation, because previously it was only within the school. So schools can now participate with the other schools, inter-school competitions. You can also have, of course, adhering to the prescripts, your district competitions, as well as your provincial, as well as national competitions. So though that is through the inputs that we received, I think it was on the 9th of March, where these draft regulations were also presented to the stakeholders, to the various stakeholders. So all those inputs were in as such, yeah. So activities will be taken, but the conditions that must be adhered to still continue, even in terms of transporting of learners from one school to the next, taking cue from the Department of Transport in terms of regulations, in terms of capacity within those transport modes as such. Yeah. So it pretty much covers, yeah.
So as long as all the criteria to protect the kids have been met, then these things, then intersport, then the schools can start traveling to other provinces and playing in matches and things like that.
Yeah, once the Gazette is out, yeah.
Is out. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then for something like Athletics South Africa, the school athletics program pretty much finishes normally around about this week or within the next couple of weeks. And they have the inter-schools athletics meeting. I think it's in Pretoria usually. But now they're only starting to take part in athletics now. Will they have like will they be able to have a prolonged season to go into like April or May, or are they now interfering with other sports? So they're going to have to stop and wait until next year?
No, I know that once the Gazette is released, probably next week, we'll also start to have engagement with all the stakeholders between ourselves and the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, as well as with the federations and codes to see what is possible within this particular time frame. But we'll certainly engage with everyone. So there is no definite answer in terms of saying, okay, it will be suspended until next year, no. But those engagements will ensue immediately that Gazette is released.
Sure. So it comes down to pretty much the criteria that everybody's got to meet to take part, to actually participate in these sports. I mean, some questions have been asked. For example, some clubs previously could get back to playing sports, and schools couldn't get back to playing sports. Couldn't get back to playing matches. And like some of the people were asking about that, because as a school body, they've been given all their PPE equipment by you guys, have been educated in how to maintain the schools and make sure that they all the hygiene's met and all the criteria all met and stuff, but they weren't allowed to go back to playing. Meanwhile, clubs that don't have as much control over them as from the Department of Education, they don't have a control over them or guidance from them, they were allowed to go back. What was the actual thinking behind that? Because what's happened is that some of the schools have actually registered themselves as clubs so they can get back to playing sport instead of staying as a school playing sport after school.
Yeah, no, I always, because I know that one is basically due to pressure. The eagerness to try and push as such. As I indicated earlier on, within the education sector as such, because of the prescripts that are in existence. Such we have your South African Schools Act, you have your safety regulations, you have your Public Service Act. All those acts, they actually require that whatever activity that takes place or that is due to take place, even in terms of the Gazette, that the consultative process must be done exhaustively. It must be intense. It must not be something that is rushed. Because as I indicated earlier on, with schools, one particular school having an enrollment of 1,000 learners, the risk is just too much as such. So hence we can't just say, okay, schools must open. We also have the standard operating procedures, which we're talking to things like the safety precautions within the schools as such. I know with the clubs, because even the numbers are not that much, so the risk is not that much as such. But you know, because when these things are gazetted, because they then provide guidance to the system, so they are applicable to all the 12 million learners in the country as such. So that's why it takes time. Even now, the president announced alert level 1 a couple of weeks ago. But for education, even the National Command Council is aware that within the education sector, there has to be these legs of consultation so that we minimize the risk that might be that might crop up.
So what happens to, so here's a question, what happens to schools that are playing into other schools and they feel that the other school has a blatant disregard of the regulations? So the results of these matches are published on various media platforms for everyone to see, but the school adhering to the rules and regulations are under pressure from parents and other stakeholders due to this. So, so firstly, it's the side that school's playing against another school and sees that the other school is not actually respecting the social distancing, the different rules and regulations that you have to meet for the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, what has been stressed through the different directorates, because at DBE we have different directorates, at a district level, at a provincial level. You know, those incidences must be reported because we don't want a situation whereby learners in the system are put at risk as such. So if they are reported, I know that the MECs, the HODs in provinces are very quick to ensure that they try to ensure that those things are controlled as such. So what is key is that people must be able to report such, because you know you can't then say, okay, because this school now is doing wrong, and then okay, let's also follow suit. No, because that won't be right as such.
Are you seeing like a difference between your independent schools compared to your Model C schools compared to your government, your no-fee schools with regards to returning to sport? Are they all under the same guidelines and regulations, or do they have different regulations?
No, they have the same, yeah, because even with regard to the consultations, we also consult independent schools. On the 9th, they were consulted and provided inputs as such, because we are in the same boat in terms of the learners that we are responsible for. So they are part and parcel of the consultative processes as we develop the gazettes. Yeah.
And clubs that use school facilities for training, there's quite a few around South Africa. What are they allowed to go back to using those facilities, and what regulations do they need to meet so that they fall in line with the Department of Basic Education?
Yeah, on this one, as I indicated, you know, because we have the standard operating procedures. So normally what happens is engagements with the particular school ensue, of course, with the school governing body, together with the principal as such. Because, you know, I know at some point, even now as such, in terms of people coming into school, more especially who are not learners or who are from outside, there are still those stricter measures because we're still in a pandemic. Even though we are at level 1, we're still in a pandemic. So schools then devise or they become cautious in terms of that. So because even though we are at level 1, it's not a normal free for all like we used to as such. So that engagement with the SGPs, that engagement with the principal is also very critical as such, so that there is also that understanding, because all the precautions or regulations that will be stipulated in the Gazette, they must be adhered to in terms of the health questionnaires, the sanitization, or all of those as such.
Okay. Sure. There's so many questions come through. Okay. With regards to your physical education at schools, because that falls that's slightly different to what we've just been discussing now. What can schools do? Because like Gymnastics South Africa have come out with a good program that schools can do within the school, and they can get it, if I'm not mistaken, free on the website, and schools can take advantage of this. What can schools do with regards to physical education within school class time?
Yeah, because physical education is a curriculum imperative. Schools are even with regard to lockdown level 3, schools were permitted to undertake those physical activities, even though in terms of non-contact, sanitization of equipment as such. So even with regard to the level 1, now where we also now introducing the issue of contact, but of course with the precautions that will be prescribed as such. And coming to gymnastics, I know we've had engagements, positive engagements with Gymnastics South Africa. They've even presented to both departments at national as well as at provincial level through the extended joint national task team. The exciting program that they are doing in terms of online training courses, safeguarding courses, and also the rope skipping and fitness in a box, which schools can be able to utilize as such. And we will see that program, it also covers almost all the fundamentals of the codes, of the various codes as such. And it also it is also delivered in looking or following the curriculum prescripts as such. So we have engaged in that, and what we will also be doing is that for information to be able to flow to schools, we will also be continuing in that process. Information coming through from our side to the provinces, districts, and then finally to schools, because I think it's a very good initiative that Gymnastics of South Africa came up with. It also covers issues of mental development, which is very critical as such. So we are aware of that particular engagement. Yeah.
Now, we've spoken that when the new government gazette comes out, that schools will be able to return to matches depending on the federations and the province, and then the schools themselves allowing it. However, spectators and parents will not be allowed to watch the matches. Am I correct?
Yeah, you are correct. You are quite correct. You know, that one is it's one of the contentious issues. I know even with me at the school where my son is schooling, you know, there's a lot of pressure in terms of, especially with regard to primary school learners. But we'll see as we receive inputs from the stakeholders, and then what we finally come up with. But currently, no spectators allowed. But also because now that is a prescript that was gazetted by the Department of Culture. We have to follow that as such, because we take cue from COGTA as well as the National Command Council. But I know that there is a lot of pressure, more especially with regard to primary school learners as such. But it's just that we are in an unfortunate situation of the pandemic as such. So some of these things will not be able to happen as they used to happen.
Now, here's a question slightly out, well, it's out of the school space, but it's still with the extramural kind of activities. Is school choir music? What does that fall under? Do you cover that? Yes. So what are their requirements too?
No, we cover that. Yeah, I know that tomorrow we are having a national coordinating call. We are having engagement with the artistic committee as such, in order to be able to look at the modalities with regard to the resumption of choral choral activities as such. I know that it's there in the Gazette, but we also have to work out how that can be done, and also see the various possibilities as such. So we're still receiving inputs even in that space as such, because it also falls in our section. It's part and parcel of the enrichment programs, including your spelling bee. Okay, we're spelling bee, we're allowed to resume even at alert level 3 due to the numbers that are involved. So it's part and parcel of the engagements. It falls within us. Yeah.
Here's an interesting one. If you've got a boarding school, so therefore you actually do have a kind of bubble in the boarding school, will those boarding school kids be able to be spectators at matches, or are they also not allowed?
No, currently not allowed. Yeah, currently not allowed. Yeah, because within a bubble, we also have to do testing as such, so that you are 100% sure that those learners are free from the virus, so there's no risk as such. Just that currently the risk is just too much, but I know that even with regard to the standard operating procedures, it also talks to issues of hostel learners who are residing in hostels. What are some of the guidelines that must be undertaken as such? Yeah.
Now, one of the things that's coming from some of the sporting federations is that because there's been no sport that's taken place over the last year, there should be a backlash, like a dropout of a lot of the kids wanting to play sport. Are you guys going to be working together with the different sporting federations and bodies to try and grow their sports back and get the participation back when school sport is resumed?
Yeah, no, as I indicated earlier on, once the Gazette is out, we'll also have engagements between ourselves and the Department of Sports and Culture, and also further have an engagement with all the stakeholders who's in terms of the federations, in terms of the school sport codes, in terms of the SGBs, in terms of the teacher unions, where we're now looking at practically in terms of implementation, how that is going to pan out. So we'll cover all those things as such. And then those engagements, because we are at national level. So even at a provincial level, the expectation is that those engagements also take place, taking cue from what has been happening at national as well as at a district level going down.
So are you worried that if we return to school sport, we might have a third wave coming into our winter?
Even without a resumption of sport, the third wave is a great possibility in the country, because now we are moving towards winter, towards autumn, winter, being the cold season, and also the fact that now since we have moved to alert level 1, there's been opening up in terms of activities, economic activities in the country. So even the scientists, when we look at the advice from the scientists who are also advising government at the National Coronavirus Command Council, they are also indicating that there is a possibility of a third wave if we don't do our bit in terms of ensuring that we adhere to the prescriptions that are currently in place in terms of social distancing in our normal daily lives as such, even when we move to the shopping malls, because that has an effect in terms of schooling as such. Whatever happens in a community, because schools are part and parcel of the community. So if the community is behaving well, adhering to all these, then we minimize the risk of a third. So according to the advice that we normally hear being detailed by the professionals who sit at the National Coronavirus Command Council, there is that possibility of a third wave.
Can you, just as a summary, because we've gone over our hour now, just as a summary, can you just go through again what schools can and can't do if they can return to play, can't return to play, as per the government gazette that'll come out next week? So not prior to the government gazette coming out, and also not prior to the sporting federations and bodies once the gazette has come out, their requirements and then the schools' requirements stuff. Can you just go through what schools can and can't do again?
Yeah. Well, in terms of the gazette that we are currently consulting on, one, okay, it talks to issues of contact sport coming into play, but it also talks in terms of the limitations in terms of numbers for your indoor activities, the maximum of 100 people, and for outdoor activities, a maximum of 250 people. And that 250 is not only confined to athletes or learners, but it covers everyone, be it your technical officials, your volunteers, your medical teams, if you have your medical teams, everyone that will be in that locality or in that stadium. And then the other thing, one, the issue of spectators not allowed at this particular point in time, and also even in terms of when schools now engage in such the same time, probably one school wishes to play with another school, that is allowed, your inter-school, as well as travel to other areas. But in terms of travel, also in terms of prescriptions, as guided by the Department of Transport, more especially around the issue of capacity of those transport modes, also even the distances. We know that for distances within 200 kilometers, Department of Transport has prescriptions with regard to capacity, as well as for distances beyond 200 kilometers. So that all those the activities can start, but also even in terms of entrances and exit points into the stadium. So there must be one at least, so that you are able to control and ensure that everyone who enters the stadium has undergone the health screening processes, has undergone the temperature testing, has also even filled that questionnaire, which is important in terms of whenever there are cases or the incidences in terms of contact tracing, and also even in terms of let's say, okay, people, players are playing, and then all of a sudden one player wants to go out. It also prescribes, also directs what must happen. The player must get a pass out. When he or she comes back, he or she must also undertake the same process of screening, and also even with regard to social distancing. They say in a team of, you have a team of 15 football players, only 11 are on the field. Of course, they won't be wearing masks, those that are on the field, but the ones that are serving as reserves before, the expectation is that they are also masking, they are wearing their masks, and they are also social distancing as such. And then also even in terms of the playing equipment and implements, they must be sanitized before and after use, so that we try and adhere to all of that. So all those requirements, all those preconditions must be in place, even in terms of ablution facilities. There must be a controlled measure in terms of, or process or procedure in terms of going to the ablution facilities, so that there's also that social distancing. And then the other one is that, with the common places, like in a stadium setting as such, common places like your showers, like your showers, your change rooms, those ones must be kept closed such, so that we try to minimize the spread of the virus. So those are the pretty much the conditions, even though it's still in a draft format, and we are receiving inputs. As we are receiving inputs, so what I'm indicating now, we find that probably there are some minor changes here and there, but basically, overall, those are some of the conditions that must be adhered to.
Cool. And then just as a recap also, that so if the government says it can happen, but then the sporting body just says that it can't happen, it can't happen. If the government says it happens, sporting body says that it can happen, but the provincial side says it can't happen, it can't happen. There are various steps that need to take place prior to being able to return to playing sport. We've got to, I think, not even half of the questions. There were so many questions, but our hour's done for the moment, for this time around. What I will do is I will print out the questions and send them all through to Bongani, so he can, him and the minister and everybody can have a look at the questions, because there are various questions and it will help them for reporting back and speaking to everybody at a later stage. And who knows, maybe we can get Bongani back in one of our future webinars to talk about the next phase, the next step. Cassie, would you like to say thank you and something to Bongani quickly?
Bongani, thank you sincerely. I really appreciate this. And to all the coaches out there, I hope it was very valuable to you. We like to get feedback, so give us a little bit of feedback on it. And I must tell you, next week, what we're going to talk about is we're going to look at you as coaches, as a brand, and how important it is to promote yourself and to make a name for yourself. So that's going to be the topic next week. So, Bongani, thank you. I really appreciate everything you do. You've always been a star. We've worked with you before, and you've always, whatever we've asked you, you've always come up to the plate.
No. Thank you so much, Casey and Sean. Firstly, thank you so much for providing us as the education sector the opportunity to share with the coaches. And thank you so much to the coaches for, I see the comments are coming in. We'll look at all those comments. And also because the key thing is for us to build. That is very important for us. So what these engagements we really appreciate such, because they also add or enrich what we are doing, because we can't do it. We can't do it as national. That's why I'm also thankful of our provincial colleagues, provincial education department colleagues, who are also part and parcel of the engagement, as well as the district officials, as well as the officials at the local level. Because for us to be able to ensure that we effect change in the country, we must all work together. As such, all your sporting bodies, departmental officials, stakeholders, teacher unions, governing bodies, we must all work together, because our key stakeholder is a learner. So we really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.